The Theosophical Society presents Joy Mills in a talk entitled Techniques of Achieving Alignment.
Now tonight I'd like to turn to some more specific matters in the preliminary steps of meditation. Probably from one point of view, all of us engage in meditation at some time or other, at least in that kind of meditation which is perhaps at the threshold of the true discipline, which is often spoken of as yoga, the real discipline of meditation. We all engage in times of certainly creative brooding, of trying to discover what life is all about, or we turn within in an effort to find a solution to some problem that is concerning us. And at such a time, there seems to be a real centering of ourselves, a real focusing of all of our energies towards an understanding or towards arousing a realization that will enable us to answer the question which we may have posed to ourselves. Now, last week, as I say, in describing some of the features of this field of meditation, we suggested that the stairway of the self is composed of different densities of energy. And the chart which we have here on the Constitution of Man suggests a sevenfold system of the energies of consciousness, the energies which consciousness utilizes at the various levels of awareness. In beginning the practice of meditation, I suggest that we have to begin where we are and with the equipment that we have. I think often some of the problems with meditation arise simply because we are not content to begin where we are. We'd like to be something different, or we'd like to sort of overleap the personality and get at once into some other state of awareness and consciousness and forget the personality. And the part of the problem is that our personalities simply will not be forgotten. They intrude themselves in some way upon our attention. And so I suggest that we have to begin where we are and with the equipment that we have, and come to terms, as it were, with ourselves, accepting ourselves as we are. We have, in one sense, if I can put it this way, to get ourselves together in order to undertake this task of meditation. Now, we may feel that we are very, very familiar with what may be called the three bottom steps of the stairway of the self: the physical, the emotional, and the mental worlds or realms of energy. But whether we are familiar with these realms or not, we really do not have a great deal of control over these areas of consciousness. That is, unless we have been engaged in the practice of meditation over a considerable period of time and have learned from either that practice or other practices to control consciousness, to control these vehicles. So the first of the preliminary steps in the practice of meditation, I suggest, may be referred to as an inner alignment, a method of bringing the brain consciousness into that state of refinement or adjustment which will permit of a contact with the immortal self, the immortal soul. I would like to suggest for any here who are perhaps beginners at meditation or who are considering beginning it, that this is perhaps the main stumbling block because one gets so easily discouraged. One can say, I've been trying for a whole week to give 5 minutes a day, and I can't seem to get my thoughts to, obey me. Well, Some people try for years. Some people work at it for a whole lifetime and suddenly find that some little thing, they think that now I've really got it. After years of consistent practice, I really have it. And then comes along a crisis, something on which we stub our mental or emotional toes, and something is triggered, and we find that we don't have the conscious control that we thought we had. Because it is very easy, from one point of view, to control our feelings, to control our actions, to control our thoughts when we sit quietly, undisturbed by any outer events, in our own little area, the place we have set apart for our meditation. Very easy after a while, and thought is very inspiring, and we can dream the loftiest visions, and we can visualize ourselves in a state of love and peace and understanding. But the real test of meditation is, as I think we all well know, whether we can take that awareness, that consciousness, into the world of everyday existence and react, act with calmness, with peace, with tranquility, and so on. So what we are talking about is this matter of alignment, which is bringing the brain consciousness, the everyday awareness, into a state of refinement or adjustment which will permit at every moment contact with the immortal self within. The meaning of the word alignment is probably very clear, and what I propose therefore simply is that the essential man, the spirit, the soul, has its habitat in a realm beyond the mind, and our aim, which is really then the aim of the whole evolution of man, is the alignment of the threefold personality with this higher self or soul. To begin with then, these three lower bodies, vehicles, physical, emotional, and mental, this in which the personality is concerned, this is our primary concern. For only when they provide a balanced and smoothly integrated vehicle do we begin to bridge the gap between the personality and the immortal self. For example, I think it may be suggested that true abstract thought becomes possible only when the personality has achieved a reciprocal vibration to that of the soul within, and is therefore sufficiently aligned to form a moderately unimpeded channel. This alignment, as we suggested earlier, is sometimes attained in moments of supreme endeavor, at times of stress or intense aspiration, or even in times of physical danger. We have probably, I think, all experienced moments of crisis, when some crisis faced us, and we felt that we had a new strength, a supreme strength, an inner strength. The mind perhaps worked like lightning, and we knew instinctively what to do. And it's always interesting the words that we use to describe such an occasion. We say of such a moment, we rose to the occasion, as though there were, in a sense, an ascent upwards. Whereas if we do something that we don't like, or we engage in say, an angry word or an emotion of fear or anxiety, we always say we somehow fell to a lower level. We really use words that depict almost an ascent or a descent. And I think these terms in themselves are extremely useful. Now, while this may occur, this rising to the occasion, while this may occur only rarely, we certainly do not forget that in such times we felt no fear, no anxiety, no insecurity, no doubt. We knew, and the knowing was complete and whole, and it seemed to engulf us, to take us in completely. We were fully able to meet the demands upon us, and such a memory, of course, should give us confidence that alignment is possible. If it can be done once, it can be done again. And if it can be done twice, it can be done as a continuing attitude towards life. Now, since, therefore, meditation builds, in a general sense, builds a bridge between the inner and outer aspects of life, we are talking tonight, I would suggest, about this end of the bridge and making it secure, this end of the bridge of consciousness, which is focused right here. Don't try to, be an aerial, ethereal creature lost in some realm of meditation, moving about the world, in a kind of vacuum. What we're talking about is making this practical, that this does something to transform our lives right here, to lead a different kind of existence. This is a very practical matter. And so what we're talking about, as I say, is making secure this end of the bridge, making sure that on this shore where the personality is, where the incarnation has taken place, that there is a firm structure to receive the traffic that will cross the bridge from the further side. Next week, to anticipate a bit, we will discuss concentration and imagination. And in this discussion, we are concerned with the bridge structure itself. And then in subsequent talks together, we'll talk about the other side of the bridge and what can come then across the bridge into the consciousness at the personal level, into the brain consciousness, into the consciousness of our daily existence. Now, to secure this end of the bridge structure, we have to consider, first of all, of course, who is doing the securing. That is, who is putting down the various posts and everything else that is put down. I'm not a bridge builder, but I know posts go down, and whatever else goes down, cement and rock and all the rest, iron girders and so on, that secures this end of the bridge. Who is doing it? Who is the controller? Who really runs our lives? Or at least who ought to run things? We have spoken in very general terms of an outer and an inner world. We also, of course, have, we might say, outer and inner selves with which we inhabit these two worlds. We think very frequently that mystery only veils the inner self, and that there is a mystery that guards the inner world. And certainly there is an interdependence of these two selves of our being, and this interdependence is one of the age-long problems of mankind. But the outer self, of which we seem to know more, also has its mysteries. It is complex in its constitution, as well as its nature, and not as clearly understood as might at first be expected. How well do you know your physical mechanism? How well do you know your emotions? How well do you know your thoughts and your mental vehicle? Are you really on speaking terms with yourself? Have you ever carried on a conversation with yourself and come to know yourself? This outer self is made up of the physical body, the emotions, and the mind, each of which has its own unique characteristics, yet none of which is truly the I who is doing the bridge building. When we come to look at the matter, of course, this is obvious. We are not our bodies, not our emotions, not even our thoughts, though we act, feel, and think through them. Unfortunately, of course, we do not always remember this differentiation and often become identified with any temporary overriding urge or thought or feeling. We may even become surprised at what is going on if we set up the habit of watching our actions and motives, standing as an observer detachedly in the wings, watching the performance of the personality out there on the stage. We begin to see, if we really observe, we begin to see that different parts of ourselves are behaving in different ways. One part, for example, may be tired or lazy, while another is overactive and fretting to get on with something. Has this ever happened to you? One part may be rebellious, while another is quite content to let things be. One part may crave to pursue a particular line of action, while another part is afraid to move out and prefers to do something else. Have you ever experienced any of these, what I might call splits, inside? There are times, perhaps tonight, you say, it was a hard day. I might have said, my body would really rather just sit down. I wonder if there's a way out of being at the class tonight. I wonder if I can get someone else to take it, and so on. You see, and the body says it would like to just relax and rest. But something else, says, now look, you agreed to do this. You're going to be there. You're going to be there, and you're going to stand up and say all the proper things, and so on, you say. And so these conflicts come about, do they not? We all know, I imagine, the state in which the mind persistently worries. It's like a terrier, a terrier that is forever worrying a bone or a ball or whatever it has. Can't let it go. Do you have a mind like this, that sort of enjoys worrying? It goes on and on and on. I wonder if this is going to happen. Perhaps that will happen. I'm fearful of this. I wonder about that, and so on. It worries and worries and worries. We may have an emotional nature that is quite fearful, while all the time there is something else, a self that is telling us that such a state is utterly without foundation. Perhaps this has happened to you, so that you worry a while, and then something comes in and says, now really, this is ridiculous. You shouldn't be worrying. There's nothing to worry about. Or we feel fearful. We hear a noise. Something goes bump in the dark, and we begin to feel fearful, and then we, turn over and say, now look, this is utterly ridiculous. There's nothing in the house that can harm me. There's nothing to be afraid of. That was just a creak in the wood, an expansion of joints or whatever, and so on. And so we carry on these conversations. But the important thing to note is that we are not always in agreement with the different parts of ourselves. So we are out of alignment. How can there be true meditation, a true moving across the bridge in order to open the channel to the immortal self, if we're out of alignment, if we are out of tune with ourselves? Can anything come through? It's very much like having a pipe. You see, there's a channel, a pipeline, inwards. But we have fragments of this pipe in different places, as it were. And so consequently, nothing can flow through clearly or purely. It's clogged at some point, or it's out of joint in some point. You may remember the wonderful phrase in the Bible when St. Paul complained about the warring within his members, that his mind would fasten itself in one direction, but there arose this warring within the members of his being, referring, I think, very specifically to this conflict within the personal aspects of the self. Actually, of course, we can get worn out and torn apart by the conflicts that arise within us. And to meet this situation, we have to be clear on who is the self, the I, the controlling consciousness. Well, the first part of the answer begins to appear when we realize we are not our senses or our bodies, and neither are we our minds. In a sense, I think this realization, a true realization, leads us to a confirmation of the independence of an observing self. Some psychologies, following some of the Gestalt techniques, for example, advise various techniques for coming to terms with these aspects of our nature. These are usually very simple techniques of developing an interior communication towards alignment. And so I'd like to mention just a few because you might like to try them sometime. They're very simple techniques, but I can tell you that they are effective techniques in beginning to bring about an alignment of the personal vehicles. For example, sometime try this. Just sit comfortably And close your eyes and imagine that you are looking at yourself, looking at your physical body. What clothes you have on, the expression on your face. Just look at yourself, just as though you were sitting opposite a mirror image of yourself. Just look at yourself. Visualize the physical body completely. How is the image sitting? What is the facial expression? How do you feel physically? And then carry on a conversation with your body. Get to know it. Listen to your own voice. Imagine what your voice sounds like and listen to it. This is an interesting sort of thing, because have you ever said, "I told myself such and such"? Have you ever said this? Or, "I tell myself I ought to do this and that"? Have you ever said this? Try saying, "I listen to myself." Instead of telling yourself, listen to yourself. Listen to what the physical body may be telling you. Another technique or exercise is to look at the physical body in imagination and let it tell you first what it needs. The physical body needs rest. The physical body may say, "I think I'd like a glass of water." The physical body may say, "I think it's time for dinner." The physical body may say, "I'd like to take a walk. I'd like to breathe some fresh air. I need this. I need fresh air. I need nourishment. I need rest. I need water," and so on. Find out what it needs. And then, and this is very interesting to try, if you're really honest with yourself to get to know your physical body, ask your physical body what it wants. And see the difference between what it needs and what it wants. Do this, when you're faced with the Christmas dinner sometime, you see. Do this the next time you go into an ice cream parlor. You see. What does the body need and what does it want? And you will begin to discover a great many things about the physical body. But if it is to be a useful instrument to you, you ought to know it, shouldn't you? When you buy a new car, you don't just look at the exterior, do you? You like to know something about the engine, how it runs, how it operates. You want to know something of its interior. How to change a tire, perhaps. It's a useful thing to know. What to do if you run out of gas in these days, and so on. Well, isn't the physical body far more important to know than a car? Because this is your mechanism for moving about in the world of physical action. So get to know it. Be honest about it and distinguish clearly between "I need" as a physical body and "I want." I want that second piece of chocolate. I want a Coke instead of a glass of water. I want to sleep until noon, although I may need only a certain number of hours of sleep, and so on. It's very interesting what the body will tell you about its wants and its needs. Now, similar techniques can be applied to the emotions and to the mind. And as you do this observing, for example, try completing such sentences that begin with, "I have to do thus and so." And then, "I choose to do thus and so." I have to get to work today. I have to have a job in order to do thus and so. I choose to utilize my time to do thus and so. Notice again the difference between "I have to" and "I choose to." Well, these are very simple techniques, and there are others, but I'm just throwing out some of these for you to try in order for you to observe, because we all need to become familiar with our vehicles. We may think, that we have a very beautiful emotional vehicle, that if some clairvoyant were to look at it, surely they would tell us, that it is radiant with love and tolerance and gentleness and all of the marvelous virtues. We like to feel this, that we really are pretty nice people. And of course we are. I mean, after all, you wouldn't be here at a Theosophical meeting if you weren't pretty nice people. I'll admit that right off. We're all very nice people and civilized and so on. All of this. There isn't any violence and so on. But observe your emotional vehicle. Observe your mind. Is there down underneath, when you say something kind to someone, a little thought that's egging you on that says, good God, I could cut his throat, or something of this kind? Some little thought that is not quite as kindly as we express. Get to know your mind. What does it do? How does it work? Be honest about it. Well, as I say, these are just very simple techniques and exercises, and there are many others. But it is all to the purpose that we can come to know the vehicles that we have, the equipment that we have at our disposal. In the epic teachings of the Vedas, the great sacred scriptures of the East, the situation in regard to these vehicles or aspects of our nature is usually depicted in the symbology of the charioteer with his chariot and horses. The charioteer is the self. The chariot is the incarnation which he is leading, and the horses are the mental, emotional, and physical aspects which take the chariot forward. The great systematizer of all yoga systems, Patanjali, carries the analogy even further by proposing that the reins with which the charioteer controls his horses are the thoughts by which the self communicates with his threefold nature. And so he can hold the reins taut, he can loosen them, he can permit the horses to go off on their own, and so on. Plato, in the Greek tradition of the Western world, also used the analogy of the charioteer, and in one of the dialogues he remarks with great frustration, "As might be expected, there is a great deal of trouble in managing the horses." Quite an understatement, I think, if we've ever tried to manage these horses, really. The analogy, I think, of the vehicles as horses is a very good one. For actually these three aspects of our nature are, as I've suggested earlier, definite energies. And we need to be aware that we have three very different types of energy to handle. Each of these elements in our nature has its own characteristics and qualities, vices and virtues that we may need to curb or to use. Each has its own drives, tendencies, motives, and demands. And these we have to learn to handle for constructive purposes and in the service of the self, neither giving them full freedom to move in any direction, nor holding them under such restriction that the normal needs of the vehicles are not met. Each, of course, of the horses may pull in a different direction. Not always, for example, do thought and emotion go hand in hand. And so we have to perform, in one sense, a real balancing act, to stand poised in the chariot of life, holding the reins of these three rather willful horses and determining the direction they will go. And yet we are dependent on these energies or elements at our disposal, on the horses we have, and their various pulls must be assessed and adjusted, and our own vision harnessed to what may be called their potential horsepower, because this is the energy, the horsepower available for this incarnation. And its proper utilization enables us to live that kind of life which is the totally integrated life and permits the inner vision to come through and influence our lives. In all of this, of course, the strong hand of the one in charge is vitally needed, the guiding hand of the charioteer who holds the reins and sees the road that the horses are to move along. Now, one other point before we come to another exercise. We and we alone must bear full responsibility for the elements in our charge. Let us not say, he made me think that. He drove me to that anger. He caused that anxiety. He brought about that fear. Something outside, an external source, impelled me to do that, to move in that direction, to act in that manner. The horses are our own driving energy, but we have created the horses. We have built them, fashioned them in accordance with our own past actions, feelings, and thoughts. And just as we are training the horses of our personality now, so are we building, as it were, creating, shaping, fashioning the type of horsepower we will have in future incarnations. We alone bear the responsibility. And this is why, in one sense, you see, in talking about meditation, in suggesting some of these techniques, in suggesting the benefits, in suggesting the need for alignment, it's very true, according to the old axiom, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And so I can present this to you, but it is up to each one of us to determine whether we'll let the horse drink of the water, as it were, and take advantage of the opportunity offered by a knowledge of the techniques of meditation. And so what we need to begin with is a technique for bringing these elements into alignment so that they act in harmony and are responsive to the charioteer, the immortal self. So I suggest we might try together, very briefly, an exercise in alignment, an exercise in disidentification along with alignment, and see if we individually can begin to discover what are some of the clues as we go through this very brief exercise together. So I'll ask you to just sit comfortably. If you don't want to participate, that's all right, but if you would like to, just sit comfortably. I suggest you close your eyes so that you, by that action, you shut out all the external stimuli that may be impinging upon us. And first, make a deliberate effort to relax all physical tension. Think right through the body from head to foot, relaxing each part. Nervous tension must be consciously released. And while physically poised, we are at rest. I have a body, but I am not my body. Whatever the condition of my body, well or ill, rested or tired, it is not my real I. My body is my precious instrument of experience and of action. But it is only an instrument. I treat it well. I breathe in and breathe out. I have a body, but I am not my body. Now shift the polarization to the emotional level. Draw in the consciousness and try to stand at a still central point. The emotional body can be imagined as a smooth and limpid pool with a quiet, reflective quality which will offer no impediment to alignment with the mind. I have emotions, but I am not my emotions. They are countless, contradictory, changing, and yet I know that I always remain I. In times of hope or despair, in joy or pain, in a state of irritation or calm. I have emotions, but I am not my emotions. Now turn the consciousness to the mind. I am a point of focused thought. I have an intellect, but I am not my intellect. It is more or less developed and active. It is undisciplined but teachable. It is an organ of knowledge, both of the outer and the inner worlds. But it is not myself. I have a mind, but I am not my mind. I am a center of pure self-consciousness, a center of will, silent, at peace, calm. I am the constant and unchanging self. From that center, unchanging, constant, I turn outwards to the mind, an instrument to use in thinking. I return to the emotions, an instrument to use in feeling. I return to the body, an instrument to use in action. Thank you for trying that with me. This is again just a very simple but preliminary. Sometimes after one has been engaged in meditation for some years. It's like sort of practicing the scales for a pianist, a warm-up, as it were, to be sure the alignment is present, to be sure one is aware of the body, the feelings, the thoughts, and that these are instruments. And just as the accomplished pianist never forgets his scales, but often does use them as for warm-up practice, so the individual seated in the calm center of meditation never forgets the preliminary steps and often uses them as the pianist does his scales to be sure the attunement is there, the harmony is there, the alignment is present.
This concludes Techniques of Achieving Alignment by Joy Mills.